Russia launched a wave of airstrikes on the Ukrainian city of Kyiv early this morning, the largest attack on the capital this year.
The city's military described it as a comprehensive airstrike, with further reports of explosions in Zaporizhzhia and the Black Sea port of Odesa.
The attack came after the Kremlin claimed there was an attempt to assassinate President Putin with a drone strike on the Kremlin, something Ukrainian officials have denied. Vincent McAviney has this report.
Flying in from the left, what appears to be a drone, then an explosion over the Kremlin. This footage is unverified, but the Kremlin says that early on Wednesday morning, 2 drones targeted the residence of the president. Moscow was quick to blame Ukraine, claiming they were downed by defenses and that no one was injured. On Russian state TV, a dramatic interpretation on this talk show yesterday. The presenter announced breaking news. There's been an attempt, he says, to assassinate President Putin. President Zelensky, on a visit to Finland, denies any Ukrainian involvement.
We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapons for this.
In daylight, there was no obvious signs of damage to the Kremlin, but lots of questions still. Who launched the drones? With what aim? Was this an internal operation or even a false flag event? Whatever narrative Moscow pursues, the United States has urged caution.
First, I've seen the reports. I can't in any way validate them. We simply don't know. Second, I would take anything coming out of the Kremlin with a very large shaker of salt.
Last weekend, Russia accused Ukraine of launching a drone strike on a fuel depot in Russian-occupied Crimea. Days later, bombs detonated and derailed 2 freight trains in a part of Russia near the Ukrainian border. Citing security concerns, several Russian regions have now cancelled military parades planned for May the 9th, Victory Day, when Russians mark the defeat of Nazi Germany. For now, the Kremlin continues to insist that the big Red Square parade in Moscow will go ahead despite last night's explosions. Unusually, though, Red Square has been closed to the public since the end of April, reflecting perhaps a sense of wariness. Whatever actually did happen above the Kremlin, supposedly one of the most secure seats of power in the world, it's likely to intensify this conflict. Overnight, another oil refinery in southern Russia has been attacked by a drone and is ablaze, according to Russian state media. In apparent response, explosions have been heard overnight in several Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv. The city's military administration described it as a comprehensive airstrike with missiles and Iranian-made drones, the largest on the capital since the start of the year. Vincent McAviney, BBC News.
Let's talk to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, who's in Moscow. Steve, morning to you. I mean, what do we know? I mean, there are reports now of this drone attack. We saw in that report no obvious damage to the Kremlin, but what details do we have? What efforts are being made to find that out?
There's a lot we don't know. I mean, we don't have the full picture of what happened. We know what the Kremlin is saying, that this was a Ukrainian drone attack, 2 drones that penetrated the Kremlin complex with the aim of assassinating President Putin. I have to say, this doesn't really look like an assassination attempt. Even Russian television last night was saying that these kind of drones could not carry enough explosives to create substantial damage, and this was more likely to have been an attack just for show. So that begs the question, what was it? Who was behind it? Was this Ukraine trying to send a message to President Putin that, wherever you are, we can reach you? Ukraine has denied that. Was this the work of Russian partisans? Or was this the work of the Russian authorities or elements of the Russian security services? Some kind of false flag operation to be used as a pretext to escalate the war? We simply don't know.
OK, there's that then, which is still being investigated, Steve. And then we saw that fire at the oil refinery as well. I think we had some unverified pictures of that. Tell us more.
Well, I mean, over the last few days and weeks, actually, there have been a string of drone attacks on various installations, including fuel depots, in parts of Russia close to the border with Ukraine. And that has sort of increased the sense of uneasiness and nervousness here in Russia in the run-up to Victory Day, the big national holiday on May the 9th, which celebrates the Soviet defeat of Nazi Germany. Quite a few Russian regions have actually cancelled their traditional military parades, their May the 9th parades, citing security concerns. As far as we know, the big parade in Moscow will go ahead on May the 9th on Red Square. But as I say, there is this sense of uneasiness here.
A sense of uneasiness, and I just wonder, Steve, how the media is reacting there. And, you know, in light of some of these parades, the more regional ones being scaled back. But in terms of tone, what's the reaction been?
I tell you what was interesting. I watched the main news bulletins on Russian state TV yesterday on 2 channels, and the drone attack on the Kremlin was the top story on both. But neither showed the actual images that had gone around the world of those explosions over the Kremlin, which I thought was really interesting. And perhaps that was because, you know, that image of an attack on the Kremlin is quite embarrassing for the Kremlin. When you think that the Kremlin, you know, the seat of Russian power, one of the most heavily protected complexes in the world, may have been penetrated by a couple of drones packed with explosives. You know, despite the air defense systems, despite all the jamming equipment that must be there to prevent this kind of thing from happening, if it's true that a couple of Ukrainian drones got through to carry out an attack, that is hugely embarrassing, I think, for the Russian authorities.
Yeah, it's an insight as well into the media and what is being shown in Russia as well. Steve, thanks so much for that analysis. That's Steve Rosenberg there.